Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar. Today we're going to talk about ITIL 2011, what it is, what it means, and the phases involved in IT service management according to the ITIL framework. So we'll get started. What does ITIL stand for? It stands for Information Technology Infrastructure Library. So who would have an infrastructure library these days? Well, it turns out that this name is inherited from the old days when they actually had a library with documentation about their mainframe computers. So the name carried on, Information Technology Infrastructure Library. But don't worry, we'll explain what it really is. So today we're gonna have the following agenda. So after we've explained what ITIL is, we're gonna look at its history and how this framework was developed. And since it is a framework, we need to understand the difference between a framework and a standard. Finally, we will finish that part of the discussion off by mentioning the certifications involved in being ITIL certified. There's different levels, of course. So once we've done that, we'll start into the meat of the presentation, which talks about the benefits of applying such a framework. And I'll mention some terminology which will help us understand the different phases of ITIL. We'll spend the rest of the presentation talking about the 5 different phases of ITIL at a high level. So that will be the majority of these slides. I have about 32 slides, so it should take us about half an hour to complete. The hope here is that this presentation will generate some good discussions in your teams. It has in my workplace. We've tried it with a few teams, 3 different teams actually, and it generated some really good discussions, even if our institution was not in fact ITIL certified or an ITIL institution. So what is ITIL? It's actually a series of 5 publications. Each one is for the different five phases of ITIL. So each one of these documentations talks about the best practices involved in managing your IT services, from developing them all the way to launching them and putting them into production. It's designed by experts in the field of IT service management. It's written by a global user community called ITSMF. It's of course vendor neutral, which means you can apply it without having to work with only HP products or only cPine products. It's non-prescriptive as well, so you can adapt it to your specific needs in the way that you work at your organization. So it's the most widely used framework for IT service management globally. And that's something to note, that ITIL is so prevalent that it's worth at least knowing what it is. So how did ITIL develop? Who made this framework? Well, in the 1980s, the British government, the Office of the Government Commerce, created this framework. Why? Because they needed to standardize the services that the government was receiving. It was receiving all these IT services, and they needed some kind of standard. Finally, in 1991, the first articles and the first exam was launched for the first version of ITIL. 2011, version number 2 was released. And in 2006, ISO 20000 was created based on the ITIL framework. Now in 2007, the most popular version of ITIL came out, which was version 3. And you'll find a lot of experts actually certified as masters in ITIL version 3. Now in 2011, the latest version came out, and this is today's presentation is based on that framework and the latest update. In 2013, however, you should note that the OCG gave ownership rights of the ITIL framework to Axelos, which is now maintaining it. And the books that I mentioned, the 5 publications for ITIL, are actually published by TSO, the official publisher. Now, if you'd like to get certified, well, you would have to work with a company such as Technologia or other companies that give training, on-site training. You could study on your own as well. Companies such as APMG will administer the exam, and of course Excelos is the one that's managing the content of the ITIL framework. Here we go, as we said, developing the content, examinations, and training. So that's the current industry when it comes to this certification. So again, I mentioned that ITIL is a framework and that there's a difference between a standard and a framework. So it turns out that frameworks certify people. For example, with ITIL you can get 22 credits to become an expert, while with the standards you could certify a company, for example ISO standards, or you could certify factories, for example. In frameworks you're applying good practices or best practices in your context, while with standards you have to apply and meet all the requirements in order to be certified as a company or as a factory, and so on. So I gave some examples on the left here. I have ITIL, Prince, Lean, and so on. While on the right side I gave the ISO 20000 as an example. Okay, so here are the certification levels for ITIL. First, you have to take the foundation exam, and that gives you 2 credits. Then you have to take at least 15 credits from some of these or any of these modules. Once you've achieved enough credits, you can take the 5 credits course at the top to become an expert. Now, the benefits of ITIL. It will allow you to manage your IT services better, but like specifically what are the benefits? Well, ITIL actually produces a PDF file called Key Benefits, and here I mentioned some of the things in quotation. First, you can forecast the influence and demand on your services much better. Second, you can manage business risk for your services, and you're ensuring that there's a better quality of the services to match the customer's needs. By customer, I mean the anybody consuming the services of your IT department or IT company. You're gonna get better value for your money because now you're managing your services much better and you have to support it less, and so on. You're gonna get a better return on investment, of course. You know, you're providing an email service or virtual machines as a service to other parts of the company. That must have required a big investment. So you're going to need to get a return on investment, and with ITIL you're maximizing that return on investment. ITIL also helps you deal with the business relationships between you and as an IT service provider and the business or the customer side, and gives you some best practices as to how you're going to manage that relationship. Again, it's going to help you figure out the uptime and improve that uptime for different services. You're going to support the business change at the speed the customer needs while ensuring stable and low risk environment. You're going to quantify, clearly demonstrate the true value of the services you provide. Support your marketing and consumption of your services, and you're going to ensure the business doesn't fail. You're minimizing disruption and you're improving continuously, because ITIL will require you to continuously improve. So in other words, you're better managing your IT services. So ITIL is technically a framework for ITSM. Now I mentioned some terminology. I'm gonna mention some more here. The business in ITIL refers to everyone other than IT. The customer could be internal or external. It's basically groups in the business or separate legal entities having an SLA for the IT service. A user is one person in the customer, so basically your end user. A process is a set of steps creating an outcome. And a process usually has an owner, a manager, practitioner, an actor. A process should be measurable and responds to specific events and delivers results to stakeholders. Each process needs a RACI chart, RACI chart. We'll talk about that later, but essentially if you Google RACI chart, you'll see that it has to do with who's responsible, who's accountable, and so on for the different processes in your environment. A function is a team in the org unit or a team in your org chart that do one or more activities and processes. For example, a function would be the service desk in your IT department. Now, assets and configuration items are related, except that a configuration item is, for example, a VM provided by IT to, say, a particular development team, while a keyboard is just an asset. So configuration items can be configured, they have features, they're used, and so on, while assets are just, think of them as hardware assets. You have to track them, but not in the same way or to the same level as a configuration item. So ITIL actually asks you to create a database of all your configuration items and their dependencies and how they're related. In ITIL, the definition of an incident is an unplanned interruption to an IT service or reduction in quality of an IT service. Some incidents can be regular, some incidents can be major. And this is different from a problem. A problem is another record that you track and that results from analysis of recurring incidents or from major incidents. So if you're working in a service desk, for example, yes, you're getting incidents and you may be calling them tickets or support tickets, but in ITIL the terminology is that you have incidents, problems, and events. So once you have a recurring incident, it becomes a problem and needs to follow a certain process because it triggers that process. Again, process here is a set of steps creating an outcome and so on, so that the problem can then be addressed in the way that ITIL recommends in terms of best practices and which teams will review the problem and so on. Right, so problems are used to find the root causes, while sometimes you might get an incident and a simple reboot might fix it. So incidents are dealt with differently than a problem in the sense that problems need to have root cause analysis. An event is considered even less important than an incident. Events usually would be a notification that the backup had succeeded. That's considered an event. Nothing to worry about, but it's logged in some sense. And you'll notice some of these words being used by different institutions or different companies, especially the bigger companies. Microsoft has an event viewer inside its Windows operating system, right? So ITIL now defines a service because, of course, ITIL is all about service management. So your IT services, while